Hi, Mimsy here. Welcome to my workroom. Come on in and let me show you around. So this is pretty much my whole space right here as far as where I put my furniture and where I actually do the slipcovers and the upholstery. This is the lifting platform that I made out of an old barber chair. So I was initially going to just use a rolling chair like this and take the seat off and put the platform on this piece here, but my son is a barber and he cut hair in our foyer all through COVID, so he had this barber chair here in our house and it was sitting in my garage, and I was about to load it up and take it to the dump, and then it occurred to me, wait a second, that would be perfect for my upholstery work and my slipcover. This is so ideal for upholstery and slipcovering because you don't have to be on the floor. For years and years I just left my pieces on the floor and then I would crawl around on the floor around it, which is fine. I did that for a long time and it really didn't start bothering me until recently. When you turn 50, those kinds of things, it gets a little bit harder to be crawling around on the floor. This is a game changer. And then when I have sofas, then what I use are my sawhorses. These are my sawhorses, and I just set them up like this, across from each other like that, and then the legs of the furniture, whatever size they are, fits right into these sawhorses. And the key to this is that you have a little bit of a lift so that the leg of the furniture sits right in there and it's not going to slide off and fall. So you can see it's not a huge space. I mean, this is probably 10 feet by maybe 6 feet space here that I'm using because I have to keep that area open for a walkway to get into my house. So you don't need all that big of a space. And then I have my commercial sewing machine here, which I hardly ever use. Once in a while, I probably should just get used to using it all the time. My old Bernina that I've been using for years and years, I just know it like the back of my hand, and it's just so easy for me to sit down at it and operate it without even thinking that's why but I do need to get better with that. I've almost completely closed my workroom. I say that I officially closed my workroom. I'm not really doing any more client work. I want to change the focus of my business because I've been doing it for a lot of years. I'm ready to be able to scale my business beyond the hours that I have in a day. If you are somebody that's here because you're either thinking of starting a workroom or doing it as a side business or a side hustle, slipcovers or upholstery or window treatments or Roman shades or whatever, if you are somebody who's thinking about opening a workroom or doing it as a side hustle, let me know in the comments because I'm starting to do courses and workshops, and I'm trying to figure out my audience really and who's here that's serious and wanting to do this as a business, or if most people that watch my videos are just here because they're really hardcore DIYers that want to do a slipcover for their own living room. Anyway, let me know in the comments what your situation is, and then I can gear my content towards that and really help you out with that. And we can talk more about the nitty-gritty of running a workroom, because boy, I could go on and on about it. So if that's you, then put it in the comments below that you want more information about running a workroom, because you can make a really good living, particularly if you get a designer or two. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. If you're interested, let me know. Let me show you my sewing machine space. Okay, one more thing real quick before we move on to my sewing room. This fabric I bought, or I didn't buy, it was gifted to me from Fabric 5 and Dime, that same fabric store that gave me the fabric for the poof ottoman, which I did in the last video, and you can watch that here if you want. But anyway, I picked this with this chair in mind. And I have a whole story about this chair, but I won't go into it right now. But when I received this, I don't love it for this chair. I don't know why. I want to see something else on here. So I'm thinking about using it on these chairs. Okay, so I've got 6 dining room chairs like this, and I'm in the process of stripping them down. They're painted, and I stripped this one, and this wood under here is blonde oak, and it's just gorgeous. It's such a beautiful wood. I'm thinking that I'm going to strip all these down, and I'm going to upholster these chairs with this fabric. Tell me what you think. And then back here is all my thread storage. I have more threads stored in there, more threads stored in there. some notions and things stored in there, and then more notions and things stored in here. And then beyond that, this door here is my bathroom and my laundry room, which is very convenient. I'm doing laundry right now, so it's closed. So let me pan around the whole room and show you the whole room before we get to my sewing area. That's the extent of my space. And beyond that is a little ironing table over there, which I don't use that often. That's primarily my mother-in-law's quilting ironing. When I iron, I generally take out my ironing mat, which is under my table right there, and I plop that up on my table here, and I can cover my whole table with it and iron on there. So it's nice and big, and I can iron large things like draperies. Then that door there goes out to my garage. That is basically the main entrance to my house. That's the way we come and go because my driveway is out there beyond that. So that's the main entrance to my house. So that's why this path right here has to always stay clear, because this is how we get into my house. This is the rest of my house, and that's why that path has got to stay open. And that's why my upholstery stuff has to stay pretty tight against that wall. So then I have IKEA Billy bookcases, floor to ceiling on that wall over there for all my extra fabric, and in those boxes is all my notions and drapery supplies and Roman shade supplies and things like that. That table there is my mother-in-law's sewing table. So she's an avid quilter. Those are some of her quilts up there, and she's got one on her table that she's working on. So this is my mother-in-law's space. I share my workroom with her. They moved down here about 8 years ago now. They live in a tiny house on our property. They've got less than 600 square feet. So she comes over here and she spends most of her days over here quilting. She's a pretty prolific quilter and pumps out a lot of quilts. This is her space. And that's her sewing machine back there. So then those first two shelves there are her quilting stuff and her notions and things. My zippers and some welt here, some Velcro here, but I keep this stuff on an old lamp post. So this was a lamp that I took apart, and I just kept the heavy base and the post and put my stuff on here. And I used to keep all of my welt on here, but I moved my welt to a different thing underneath the table that I could just pull straight out to my sewing machine and put all my zippers on here. And then this is my table for my Cricut stuff. My daughter mostly does that. This is my cutting table, and I inherited this cutting table from my upholstery mentor. I worked for him for a number of years, and I mostly just did tear off in his shop. He did let me do a little bit of cutting and some upholstering and closing up, but mostly tear off. And that was fine. I still learned a ton from him. He was an amazing upholsterer, best in town. As you can see, it's a huge table. This thing is 6 foot wide by 10 feet long, and there was actually another section to this. It could have been 15 feet long, which I wish I could fit it. It has a ton of storage, so it fits a full 54-inch roll of fabric under here. This is such a great table. I absolutely love this table. This is kind of my command center here. I have my laptop and my calendar, and I do all my paperwork there. I've got my large Mac over there for doing video editing and things, my printer. So this is all my administration type stuff. Ugh. I'm usually standing here for most of my videos, and I either am doing top down or right here. And a lot of times I'll have my camera right here, and you'll see this in the background. So anyway, that's my paperwork area, and that's my kitchen window. I generally don't have that closed. I usually have that open, except for when I'm recording videos. Then I'll close it and close the door behind me so that my family doesn't have to be so quiet all the time. Let me show you the sewing area. There's my yardage calculator charts, which I'm trying to make into a digital download, so stay tuned for that. I'll make those a digital download. I painted those myself, so once I get those done into a digital download, I'll make that available to you. So get on my email list and I can email that to you. And there's my mom, 1995, when she got into the newspaper for slipcovering. And then there's my whiteboard where I keep lists, and of course my sewing space here. And these windows, let me see if I can make this better. These windows were an absolute game changer in my sewing room. When we bought this house, the windows were just like this big, but they were actually up here. And so the room was super dark. and it just looks so 1970s, particularly from the outside of the house. Those windows looked totally 1970s. So I found these on Craigslist at the time. Facebook Marketplace wasn't really a thing as much. And I bought them for, it might have been $100 a piece. They're old and they're not efficient as far as heat and cold, but I live in Florida, so it doesn't matter so much. They're super efficient for light, so that's what matters to me, is having really good light in here. My brother-in-law came over and helped me install that one, and then I installed this one. So that, but it was a complete game changer. I'll see if I can link to a picture. I'll see if I can find a picture of what it looked like before. Anyway, now we're here in my sewing space. I put my sewing space here because of the light. You just can't beat the lighting right here. This is where I spend a ton of time here, and I really, really love it. The important thing about your sewing space, particularly if you're gonna be sewing big things like slip covers and drapery where you've got a big mound of fabric, it's very helpful to have an L-shaped desk like this, or an L-shaped table, even if you have to do two tables put together in an L shape. Because if you just have a table that ends like, if your table just ends here and is short there, your fabric, because you're using such big bulky fabrics, the weight of it will just pull off the side of the table and pull away from your sewing machine. So that's why it's really important, if you're gonna do home deck sewing, to have an L-shaped desk with a pretty sizable space on this side of your sewing machine. One last thing I wanna show you, and that is my compressor, because if you're gonna do upholstery, you have to have a compressor. You don't have to, but I would highly, highly recommend having a compressor. So let me show you where I keep mine and the way that I operate it, which is not ideal, but it works. And that's the door to my driveway, and there's my compressor. I just drag the whole hose into my workroom, runs its way up to where I do my upholstery. It easily reaches this spot, and it also reaches my table easily, so that I can get my pieces done in here. What I really should do is I should put a hole in my wall there and run the compressor hose along the ceiling, and then have the hose reel hanging from the ceiling so that I can just unroll it here. But I would have to put a splitter on my compressor so that I could also use it in the garage still and pump up my car tires and things like bike tires and things like that, and not have to drag it from in here. That would be ideal, and maybe I'll do that eventually. That's my sewing room. It's about a 20 by 20 space. This used to be, I believe, a breezeway between this is an exterior wall right here, this brick, and then I believe that the garage was probably just a separate freestanding garage building, and then this was the outside of the house, and this was the exterior door, and I believe that this was just a breezeway here, and then this got closed in at some point. It's a wonderful space. It was a major selling feature of this house. When we bought this house, my mom was still alive, and we thought she was going to be able to get back to work. And if you want to hear my story about my mom and how I got into sewing, you can watch that video right here. I'll put a link to that video here. I won't go into it because I could just go on and on.